today we have the amazing Mike Cobb with us today. He is the CEO of ECI Development. Oh, man, he's doing such amazing things. I'm so excited to have him here. He's doing some resort developments down in Latin America. He's actually was named one of the 100 outstanding CEOs in Central America and the Caribbean. How freaking amazing is that to have Mike on our show today? So, Mike, welcome.
Tony, nice to be with you. I always enjoy seeing you at the various conferences. It's nice to bump into you at Freedom Fest and some of the other places. And it really goes along with who you're talking with, who the folks are with us today, right? It is about freedom and as a fundamental tenet, and I know you live that, you breathe it, and then you help make it possible for a lot of folks. So thank you. I mean, you're doing a great service to the folks here today.
Well, thank you, Mike. I mean, we're both we connect so well because we're both educators. We're both looking to serve. Right, I serve people through my syndications and my coaching and what I do, and that's my calling, is to serve people in that way. You have your own serving where you educate folks. You're a speaker, you're an author, right? You're doing these resort developments for investors to come in. And when we talk investors, we're not talking like it needs to be like people with like millions and millions, oodles of dollars. These can be like mom and pop investors, right? So you're serving as well. And so first, I want to talk a little bit more about the resort developments that you're doing, but I think it's important for the folks to, the audience to understand, you're doing all these amazing things, but we all put our pants on the same way. And I find you so incredibly relatable because, you come from, industry, just like I do, just like many of the listeners do. You grew up in the hardware industry, the PC industry, building computers, selling computers, working for a company, in that hardware computer industry. And I find that amazing to share with the audience because it makes you so incredibly relatable to all of us. Yes, you're doing all these amazing things, but at the end of the day, we're all cut from the same cloth. We all have to, start somewhere. And so, and again, these conferences that you and I have connected at, I've always found you so easy to communicate with, have a conversation and say, how about this or how about that? Yeah. So I want to start with your why. Why are you can do anything you can. I know you're doing so many things, and like why do you do this, Mike?
Yeah, good question. Well, it does go all the way back to my computer days. Back in the early 90s, 93, I went on my very first trip to a little country I'd never even heard of before, Belize. A buddy of mine was going down there, and he said, "Hey, you want to go to Belize this weekend?" And I remember I was on the phone with him, and I'm like, "Absolutely." And then I'm kind of scratching my head. There's no Google back then. I'm like, "Oh, Belize, where's Belize?" I didn't know where it was. Anyway, so we went. We had a great time, and I ended up going back a couple months later, and we each bought a condo, right? And it's just a little condo on the beach. And back then you could buy an oceanfront condo for $100 grand or 120 grand, right? 120 grand for an oceanfront condo.
Where was I? Where was I back then?
Well, 93, right? I do talk about time machines, by the way. One of the fun things I talk about a lot is this concept of time machine investing, right? And if you could go back in time, would you do better? Like I always, the example I say is if H.G. Wells popped into your living room right now in his time machine and said, "Hey, come with me. I'm going to take you back 20 years. You get to bring one check. And would you come back to today, the present moment, a lot wealthier?" And I think all of us get the joke. Of course, we'd all come back a lot wealthier. It's time machine kind of concept, right? Well, so Belize was like a time machine. I just didn't know it at the time, but I loved it. I had fun. It was cool. Bought this little condo. And what we found out was that there was no mortgage money for North Americans. Like if you were a Belizean and you wanted to buy a house, you could go to the bank and borrow money. But if you were an American or a Canadian, like no bank in Belize would lend you money. And your bank back up in New Hampshire or DC or wherever you're from, they're not lending you money on a piece of collateral condo down in Belize. So there was no mortgage money, right? So my buddy and I, we started a little mortgage company to provide loans to North Americans who might have $20,000 or $30,000 to put down on a condo, but didn't have 100 or 150 or 200 to put down, right? So anyway, so we started this little mortgage company. I started to do a lot of the research. I was the boots on the ground. I would go look at the homes and properties to make sure that they were there and whatever. And my buddy is a lawyer, and he did all the paperwork and the legal title and all that kind of stuff, right? But what I began to find, and this is the answer to your question, Tony, I began to find that if you had, back then, 300-400 and up, you were getting a really nice product. But like if you were spending 100-150 like we did for our condos, or 200 even, like they just weren't quite right. Like I remember, like going in to inspect some of these properties, there'd be one outlet on the wall in the living room. And and they put extension cords and outlet strips and extension cords plugged into the outlet strips, and and the lighting in the bathroom was bad. But like when we looked at it, we just simply said to ourselves, everything here is free to fix. It doesn't cost any money to put the light in front of, over the bathroom as opposed to behind, right? Or have your countertops at the right height, or have all the door handles in the apartment be, the right height. I mean, just 20 little things like that. And so we said to ourselves, why don't we start a development company to serve North American clients with product that is customary and familiar and meets their expectations at a price point they can afford? So that was sort of the initial why. But it morphed, Tony. It really morphed, because all of a sudden what we started to realize was that it was possible to have a life in Latin America, Central America, that you could have this higher quality of life for a lower cost of living. And as we started to look at the, especially the big, the 2000, you had the big tech bubble blow up, right? I mean, right. And people lost a lot of money, right? And then the 2008, 2012, kind of the real estate crisis, people lost a lot of money. And so all of a sudden you have people with these Social Security checks of, $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 a month. Where are they going to have this really wonderful, delightful quality of life on $1,200 a month? And so the why has morphed. And today the why really is that we as a company can help people enjoy a tremendous quality of life in their golden years, right? We're talking about Social Security, right? We're talking about people that work their whole life. Now they got $1,200 a month. Like, I don't know where you can live nice on $1,200 a month in the United States. I just don't, right?
Yeah, you can't, not today.
But if you go to a country like, I know Nicaragua's out of favor, but Nicaragua, Panama, Belize, other countries in the region, right? For $1,200, $1,500 a month, you can have this incredible quality of life. The weather's great. The food is wonderful. You'll eat organic, just on and on and on. And now all of a sudden, you've done something wonderful for people who probably didn't really know how they were going to make it, first of all, but the second part of it is how they were going to enjoy it. And so for the people who are willing to travel, people a little bit more adventurous, which is about 10% of the population, right? This becomes a real viable option. And so the why is in the service of these folks at a price point they can afford. And you mentioned it doesn't have to be, millionaires, right? We have homes, ocean view homes that start at $130,000, right? And we have properties that people can rent next to the ocean for $700-800 a month, right? So like it becomes very, very affordable for middle class. And that's been our market segment. Look, the rich are always rich. The rich can take care of themselves. They got money, they can do whatever they want, right? But if you're middle class, your options shrink. But we've been able to figure out how to serve this middle class consumer with a product that really is a great fit and provides a great quality of life. And for retirees, but not just retirees, we serve younger folks, digital nomads. We serve a whole range of people. But the why, right? The why, because we can do something wonderful for folks who might not really have better options or don't know what they are, at least.
I love the why in terms of serving the middle class, right? Because sometimes they don't get enough love. They work hard for their money. And sometimes they don't get the tax breaks, they don't get the advantages that maybe they should. I love your why. Tell me, do you still have the mortgage company? Are you guys still doing that?
The mortgage company became a bank in Belize in 2003. In fact, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this September.
Nice,
next month.
Congrats.
September, our 20th anniversary as a bank. But we're still really a mortgage bank. That's what we do. Okay. We provide a ton of loans, but not just in Belize, but we provide them throughout Central America and the Caribbean. So it's nice. I mean, it serves a lot of folks who, again, don't have a lot of great options. If you don't have all the money to buy something, most banks, I know of no bank in the United States that'll lend you money on a property overseas. And most of these countries won't lend to foreigners, right?
So what I'm thinking of, what's going through my head, Mike, right now is for the audience, for the listeners here, right? You were just taking away all the excuses that I always hear about, I can't invest there because it's too expensive. Well, here we have Mike. He's telling us it's not oceanfront for, low 100s, right? Well, I can't get a mortgage over there because I'm I'm an American citizen and I'm not Belizean or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Well, Mike has the solution for that, right? So I love this, this conversation because you're just taking those excuses away. Now, you and I, we always tend to get into some really deep and great conversations about the whole macroeconomics of things.
Sure.
Like, I know you've done developments in Portugal, in the Azores, and you're in Latin America now, in different countries there. You're there for a reason, and I know your reason. I am actually scouting out property in actually Cascais, just west of Lisbon, Portugal. So I'll be out there in the month of September scouting out some different properties, and I know my macro reasons for doing that, but let's help the audience understand what's happening from a macro perspective. If you could, kind of take us down that route of why people should consider investing overseas.
Well, we've met at several conferences over the years, but they all tend to have a central theme of freedom. Just to start there, right? I mean, again, freedom economically, freedom personally. I think the COVID lockdowns really showed people the power of government in a way that was for US and Canadians especially just never really apparent. It was in our faces and it was harsh. Some people don't agree with that statement. They go, it was necessary. Okay, necessary or not necessary doesn't really matter. The power of the government was put up front hard for everyone to see. And for people who care about freedom, their personal freedom, that was shocking, and all of a sudden this awareness became real. It wasn't back here somewhere. It was right here in front of us. Okay, that really shocked people into understanding that. And I always talk about freedom. A lot of times people talk about asset protection. My business partner, he's an asset protection attorney, right? And people, when think about asset protection, they always think about stuff. Oh, I'm going to set up a trust. I'm going to put my stocks, my bonds, maybe my gold, or my real estate, whatever. I'm going to put all this stuff in an asset protection trust because I want to protect those assets. But Tony, the most important asset we have is us. It's us. It's our body. It's our physical being, right? And so if we don't get asset protection for us, right, then we're missing the most important asset we have. And having in this case, a second residency, for example, right? If we have the ability to move somewhere else that is more free than where we currently are, and many places are freer. I lived in Nicaragua for 14 years. And I remember many occasions, like we'd be coming back to the States, and I had two daughters, and I'd tell them, hey girls, listen, you can't do that. Well, why not? Because it's the US. You're not allowed to climb on the rock at the amusement park, right? I mean, whatever, these dumb little nanny state things, right? And that's a silly example, but I can remember saying those things to my daughters many times over the years. Well, we're back on the States, you can't do that here, right? Whereas in many parts of the world, you're just a lot freer. Anyway, but coming back to this asset protection point, like if we give ourselves the ability to move from our home country, and more importantly, stay somewhere else. That's the key. The key is staying, which is why you need a formal residency, right? You don't want to be an illegal immigrant in a foreign country. Right? You want a legal residency somewhere else, right? And so many of the properties that we work with and many of the countries we work in, the ownership of a property qualifies you for a residency in that country. And so I would bet that fully a third of the people who own a property with us overseas own it and also obtain a second residency. And you're not giving up your citizenship. You're still a citizen of US, for example, but you become a resident of the foreign country. And what that residency does is it gives you the permission, if you choose to live there forever, it gives you the right to do that, right? So it gives you an option. We call it a plan B, right? It's a nice plan B. But, coming back to the investment side, many people think, oh, I'm diversified. I'm internationally diversified. I own BMW, Nestle, and Toyota stock. Okay, but where do you own them? You own them on the New York Stock Exchange, right?
Bingo,
Right.
That's right.
And so all of a sudden, this idea of being internationally diversified, kind of crumbles a little bit, right? And so one of the things that we found with a lot of investors, hard asset investors, right? We do a lot of conferences that are metals conferences because hard assets are pretty important in real estate. And I know you do syndications, right? So this idea of a hard asset investment. Well, if you can take a little tiny piece, 5%, 10% of your investable portfolio and move it outside your home country, right? Outside your home country, whatever that is, right? And have true international diversification in a hard asset, we see a lot of folks, and a lot of these are the same folks that end up using that hard asset overseas to get a second residency as well. So now you're really layering the benefits, right, of hard asset diversification outside your home country, a residency for yourself and your family outside your home country, so the plan B, right? And then depending on the country, you start to generate cash flow in another currency, right? Yep. So now all of a sudden you've really kind of layered a lot of different diversification into one thing. And it sounds pretty complicated, but it's not. It's actually pretty simple and it's fairly easy to do, right?
So it can be very low cost to buy a place. You make it easy from the perspective of you have the mortgage, the banking solution to help lenders that are non-citizens of that particular country. Right. You know, talking about the, you know, I love this concept that you introduced, you know, this freedom diversity, yes. You know, equating it to like, you know, something we all relate to, right? I'm sure the viewers and the listeners can very much relate to diversity in their own portfolio. If they have a 401k or stocks and bonds, things like that for retirement, they understand diversity of those stocks and bonds and what they have. Freedom diversity, like you're explaining, is the same thing. You're just saying, hey, I have a certain amount of freedom here in the States, and this is all fine and well, and there's people flocking into this country, and there's reasons for that, and there's goodness, and I'm not poo-pooing this, the US of A, you know, hey, I have the hat on, you know, I wear the red, white, and blue, I love this country and all that it offers and the opportunities. However, just because of all of that goodness doesn't mean that I'm going to be blind to diversification of my freedoms. And so being able to go someplace else, I love how you mentioned, you know, being able to buy a property. And if you're not there year round, you're renting it out, Airbnb, absolutely. VBRO, right? You're renting it out. You're gaining a currency, you know, and something other than US dollars. Yep. So that provides you just some other diversification of having currency in something other than US dollars, which today, because of the way I'm not saying the US dollar is going to collapse this year or next year, but it's definitely trending in a questionable direction, especially if you have kids, if you have a next generation that you're worried about, being able to pass on some of these assets to the next generation is going to be extremely valuable to them.
Absolutely.
You're operating, you're creating these resort environments, beautiful resort environments. You've done this, and now let me ask you, you did that in the Azores years ago. Can you touch the Azores for the same amount of money today as to what you put into it however many years ago?
No.
Did it go down?
No. I'm thinking the answer is no. It did not go down. But the Azores, Portugal is one of the least expensive countries in Europe, right? And the Azores is one of their, I'm going to call it an economically depressed zone. I can't remember what they call it, something like that, right? Yeah. And so I mean, there are all kinds of incentives. They subsidize fuel, they subsidize shipping to the island. So actually, it's less expensive to live on the Azores in the Azores than it is to live on mainland Portugal. Caixa, by the way, is spectacular. It's beautiful. I love that area. And as a beach resort, it's phenomenally inexpensive. And then when you go to the Azores, it's even less expensive. So nice. Azores is probably the least expensive Europe, but the climate is wonderful. In fact, there are 9 islands, and they all sort of have a little different climate. So depending on the island you're on, it would have different climate. But yes, spectacular, Tony, and value, unbelievable value, right?
And I love how you spoke about, because this is near and dear to my heart. It's not all about the money. Yes, we need a certain amount of wealth and cash flow, as we talk about, you know, coming in each and every month to pay our bills and whatnot. But at the end of the day, freedom exists between here, right?
Absolutely.
To be able to have the freedom of being able to walk outside, breathe fresh air, go down to a coffee shop in, you know, in Belize and pick up a good cup of coffee for $2 versus having to go to like a Starbucks in the United States, which isn't even really great coffee, right? For like $7, right? You know, to be able to, you know, you had mentioned it. It caught my ear earlier on. You had mentioned about the organic farmers. In those areas. I was just reading an article. Now that we have these mass production farms that they spray chemicals to be able to get the most fruits and yield out of those farms, they're spraying them with a compound I shouldn't mention the name of the chemical or the brand name, because
Okay.
it might get me sued, slander or something.
Uh,
But these chemicals are being sprayed on these mass production farms, and it's coming out in not only the food, but something also near and dear to my heart, wine. I love wine. Each and every
okay.
day, me and my
Wow.
girlfriend,
Yeah.
we have a glass of wine. We sit down, we enjoy the winding down. At the end of the day, we have a glass of wine, and these chemicals are traced back into a glass of wine. And I saw that today, and I'm like, man, now I feel like I now can't even enjoy a glass of wine. Yeah, being in some of these other countries where now they have organic farms here in the US too, but I'm sharing that perspective. The diversity of being able to get that also outside of the US, right? These
Yeah.
organic farms and things without the chemicals that we're putting into our bodies.
So Tony, I won't say the name, but I'll allude to it. If you go down to Whole Paycheck to buy an organic tomato, that's what I call it, Whole Paycheck. But anyway, when we lived in Managua, we had friends who ran a organic coffee plantation up in the cloud forest, but they also had greenhouses and ran cattle and pigs and chickens and eggs. We would get a coffee sack. I mean, a coffee sack of organic fruits and vegetables delivered to our home every Tuesday for $8.
Holy cow. How long ago
$8.
was that?
This we left. We were there from 2002 to 2016. So up until
Okay.
2016. So what's that about? But it might be $10 today. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, but this, I mean, we couldn't eat it all. We could
Yeah.
not eat the whole bag of organic fruits and vegetables. And then we would ask them to put in, cheese and eggs and sometimes some meats and things like that. And so they were free range, hormone free animal products, right? But I mean, it was so inexpensive. And so, so sometimes people don't understand. Like I say, yeah, you can have this higher quality of life and it costs less, right? You're going to eat everything organic and it's less than it costs to go to Food Lion or Giant Eagle and buy crap, right? Forget about Whole Paycheck. Like if we ate that kind of stuff from Whole Paycheck, it would be $300-400 a week, right? And we were, by the time we put in the eggs, meat, cheese, whatever, we might have been at 30, 40 bucks, right? For the week of everything organic,
Still a
free range.
fraction.
Yeah, right. And so this is the higher quality of life, and it translates into health, real health. And you just even think about the worry you have about drinking the wine. Now you're gonna be thinking about it's in the back of your mind. You might still enjoy the wine, but still back here, you just got this like ding, 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 right?
Yep.
Okay, the quality of life that just goes away.
Yep.
Now, right, it just goes away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And when you mention you're drinking better beverages, you're eating better food, you're eating healthier, you're healthier. And
correct.
What is freedom without health?
Nothing.
Right?
Nothing.
You need your health, right?
This
We all
asset,
know.
the most important asset we have, right? And health
That's
is
right.
fundamental. Yeah.
That's right. So,
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about because all of this can be like looking at properties overseas, potentially buying something overseas. All that can be very intimidating and confusing to
Sure.
folks. I know you
Yeah.
created a consumer resource guide to help folks. Could you
Absolutely.
tell us a little bit about that?
So we started ECI Development 27 years ago now. So over the years, we've made a lot of mistakes. I've made personal mistakes. I've owned a lot of personal real estate overseas. And as we made mistakes and learned lessons, we wrote them down. And about maybe 20 years ago, we produced the very first edition of the Consumer Resource Guide, which is just this. It's a really simple document, and it's got 15 questions that people should ask when they buy property overseas. We actually created a little checklist, right? So when you're out looking at property, there's a checklist you can use. And the idea was that we don't know what we don't know, right? And we also have to forget what we think we know. So sometimes the assumptions that we bring with us don't hold water in a foreign country, right? But if you take the two things, we don't know what we don't know, and we have to forget what we think we know, and you kind of synthesize them, you come up with one word, and that word is humility. If we approach the ownership of property overseas humbly, right? We ask more questions, we ask stupid questions, right? Whatever it is, right? Humbly, we don't assume that we know what we're doing, and we listen a lot more. We do a much better job. And so the Consumer Resource Guide now has become my book, Beyond Borders, Getting It Right the First Time. And so the Consumer Resource Guide is a free download. We offer it to anybody who asks. Just say Consumer Guide, and we'll send you a copy. It's a nice PDF. It's a great tool if you're buying property overseas to make sure that you know what questions to ask, because they're the kinds of questions we wouldn't think to ask. One that I absolutely love is, is the home or condominium plumbed for hot water in all the bathrooms? And, up in New Hampshire, I'm sure they are, because wintertime would be pretty cold, right? To have a cold
You
shower.
got that right.
But in Latin America, the common building methodology for really forever was to have cold water showers, because you know what, if you're out and it's 90 degrees and you come inside in the afternoon, take a shower. Who cares, right? Yeah. It's not that cold, right? But if you get up in the morning like I do before the sun comes up and you take a shower, I want a hot shower.
Yeah.
And so there's just something to check before you buy the property. Check and see if there's actually hot water. But here's what we don't know. Tony, you're going to love this. What you don't know is sometimes you have this cold water pipe coming out of the wall with cold water going up to both of the taps. So your faucet looks normal up on top of the sink, right? Yeah. You turn on one, there's water, turn it off, turn on the other, and it had water in. You think to yourself, well, that's probably hot water because, left is hot, right?
Yeah.
No, it's one pipe with cold going to both, and the shower's cold too. So unless we know that we got to get down on our hands and knees and look under the sink, see what's coming out, two pipes or one, right? Yeah. Anyway, this is the kind of stuff we put in the consumer resource guide, because what we want is we want people going overseas to get it right the first time. And the book is a bigger, the book is now a multi, faceted, kind of expansion upon the consumer resource guide. But the consumer resource guide is free. We send it to everybody who asks for it. And it's a tremendous resource for anybody thinking about property overseas, whether it's lifestyle, investment, residency. We also have a residency guide as well, and that's a separate document. It's also free. So if people are looking at a residency overseas, we can provide that resource as well.
I just love the fact that you bring this level of experience with you, right? I would have never thought to look for, underneath the sink to make sure there's two pipes coming out, right? I mean, you've done this. You've lived in multiple countries. You've made all the mistakes. Well, maybe not all the mistakes, but you made many mistakes, right? Yeah. And you created this guide to help people. So you've done all this. You've lived it. It's not like you're sharing something with folks that's like, yeah, this is great, but I never did it myself. No,
real world,
you've done it.
Yeah, right.
You've lived this. You've been in Nicaragua for what, 14 years, you said?
14 years,
right?
Belize for 6 months. Yeah.
So you're doing this. Your newest edition, you had mentioned the actual book that you have coming out, Beyond Borders, Getting It Right the First Time. That's going to be an awesome addition for folks to be able to get more education, more knowledge about, how to do this, right? When's that book come out?
First of the year. So right at the beginning of 2024, and we'll take pre-orders this fall, and folks want it. We would love to make sure they get the first copies coming off the press.
Excellent. Are you going to have a link on your website to that?
We will, and I can get that over to you as well, Tony.
Yeah. Perfect. Excellent. So, Mike, I love all that you shared today. You're super relatable for the audience, which is something that I love. Like we had said, we're out at conferences, several times a year. There's folks that I chat with that are just so super smart, but they're up here. They're not relatable. When you and I have conversations, we've always had conversations where yeah, you're like a relatable dude. I can put people in contact with you. And so that's why I wanted to have you on, because there's people out there who need this information, right? Sure. They may not be able to invest in the United States because obviously home prices today, super expensive. It just isn't a good fit. Even with Airbnb, it is expensive. It may not be a good fit for people because they don't have that kind of cash for a down payment. Whereas being able to say, hey, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to invest overseas in a condo that you can Airbnb oceanfront. Wait a minute. Now you got my attention, right? So I love that. I just really appreciate that. And so I know the audience will as well. So Mike, please share, where can folks find you, your website? How do they connect with you? Your email address?
Sure. Easiest way is info@ecidevelopment.com. ECIdevelopment.com is the website, but and then if they want the consumer guide or the residency guide or both, just put that up in the subject line, and we'll certainly get that right over to them. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. We're going to include that in the notes in the description for this video here, so folks have it easy touch for them to grab and find you guys. Mike, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for educating us and the audience today. I appreciate you.
Great to be with you, Tony. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Bye-bye now.